Hi, I'm Eric Ostro. Live at the Lortel is about to start. For Season 2, While Theaters Are Dark, we are discussing with our guests their thoughts on the reckoning the theater community is facing for systemic racism and their vision for the future of the American theater. To broaden our perspective, I am sharing my platform with co-hosts from the BIPOC community. We offer these conversations to help us learn and to start the healing process. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Live at the Lortel. My name is Eric Ostro. I am one of the hosts for the evening. I would love to bring on my co-host for the evening, my very dear friend, John Andrew Morrison. John, get on up here.
Well, hello there, you handsome, fabulous, dashing fellow.
Well, thank you so much. It's always good to start this off with a compliment. I'm very, very, very excited to have this guest. I stalked him on Instagram until he said yes. So let's welcome our esteemed guest, actor extraordinaire, Michael Potts.
Hooray!
Welcome. Do you think stalking was the right way to look at it, Michael?
I don't think you stalked me. No.
Well, you don't know what I do. You don't see.
True,
But yeah. Well,
and you are also handsome and marvelous and fantastic.
Thank you.
You are. I've been so excited and really looking forward to this interview. I'm a really big fan. And let's get right down to business.
Okay.
You know, your most recent big triumph was recently the Netflix production of Ma Rainey's Black Bottom with a couple of unknowns, Viola Davis, Chadwick Boseman.
I know, those hacks.
George C Wolfe, another kind of nobody. Tell me about the experience working on it. You go. I'm just going to let you I'm going to push the button and let you go because it was incredible.
That experience was like family. It became like family getting together. I mean, you get there. I mean, you named who's starring in it, and it was a bit terrifying at first, and then you get there and you realize everyone there is a professional and they're there for the work, and more importantly, they're there to serve this story, to serve this particular playwright, August Wilson. And so there was just no ego in the room, or at least ego was set aside in service to the telling of this story. And we just, we cut up. It wasn't work. It was the kind of thing you couldn't wait to get to set, so you could sort of dance with these people. No, it was a tremendous experience. It's a lifetime highlight to have done that and work with those incredible people.
What's the how much does George rehearse? Was there a lot of rehearsing? How much do you get to do?
Yeah, we did. We had the luxury of 2 weeks of rehearsal before we started principal photography, and it was like rehearsing the play. There was this hall, I think a Lithuanian music hall, that we came in, and there was the set, taped out on the floor, and we went through it like this. I mean, we did the table work, of course, first, and then we got up on our feet and started deconstructing the piece. And figuring out what relationships were and what we were saying and what the story was that we were telling, and making those connections. It was very much, our theater background, and the fact that it was a play, written as a play initially, was clear.
Mm. You also worked with Glynn Turman and Coleman, and
right.
Every time I see Glynn, it makes me very happy on camera. But I am so jealous you got to work with George C Wolfe. What is it like working with George? Because I've not worked with
George C Wolfe. I call him the mad genius, because he is so well read in anything, culturally, art, history, particularly African American culture and history, and because he has such intelligence, such an acute intelligence, and understanding of humanity and art, that you want to engage with him. And he creates this environment for the actors where he basically kind of suggests things, that his whole issue is trying to help you find your truth as opposed to enforcing his vision on you. I mean, he has his vision, he knows what he wants, but he talks to you in a way to help you find your truth. And he's willing to kind of change his vision a little bit if you find a particular truth in the telling of the story or in the representation of your character. But he just makes this giant playpen for you, and he never says no to you. So you always feel like you're being collaborated with. You always feel that what you bring to the table is incredibly respected.
And your relationship to the instrument that your character Slowdrag plays,
yeah.
How much experience have you had, or did you ever have with the bass?
Zero.
Oh.
Started off at zero. And that's the other, going back to George and his mad genius, is that he never told us how well we needed to learn these instruments, because he was well aware of our competitive natures. And he knew that would serve him. So we got coaches in our respective cities. Before we even showed up, I had a coach for 3 weeks before I left New York. And then I had another great coach once I got to Pittsburgh, and we were rehearsing this thing 3 times a week. I mean, in New York, I was hauling it from my place in Queens to the coach's place in Brooklyn.
Oh, gosh.
I mean, a double bass. I had to haul that 3 times a week. So I better learn how to play this thing for all this sweat. I'm putting a lot of sweat equity into learning this. And then we got there, and you find out Branford Marsalis is doing the soundtrack for it, and he's going to be there.
So you guys, you had you thought you all were actually going to be playing. So you rehearsed as if you were going to be the ones playing in the band. Wow.
Absolutely.
It's a pretty genius director
because he did not tell us. And I think we asked. I think Coleman asked one time, how well are we supposed to, do we know how well we're supposed to learn these things? And George never said a word.
He just didn't answer the question?
He would not answer the question. All we would know is the call sheet would say we were meeting with Branford the following week to go over music. And of course, oh hell yeah, we were rehearsing. And the great thing is that Coleman, Glenn, and I were in the same hotel on different floors. So it became this thing: you'd get off on your floor and you'd hear somebody, you'd hear Glenn on the piano, or you'd hear Coleman, I'd hear Coleman on the trombone, and immediately I had to get on the bass. And they will tell you the same thing. They would say they'd hear me strumming, and they'd run in and start rehearsing.
Wow. That's amazing.
I know August Wilson is, often compared to Shakespeare because of the mystery of the language and the poetry. How do you prepare as an actor to deliver that language? I mean, a lot of it's not, there's not a lot of punctuation in it. Pauses aren't written into it. I mean, I think when you get a script, those are kind of edited in, but
sure.
You've done Wilson before, because I know you just did it a few years ago with the revival, but can you talk to me a little bit about the process of working on Wilson?
Well, you do have to break it down. I mean, it's always when you see it on the page and you see these pages of just language, and you try to figure out how are you going to negotiate that. And so you have to pick it apart, and you have to find out what is the primary thread, what is the primary narrative of this particular speech or this particular monologue, this particular language. And because August Wilson also, very much like Shakespeare, embellishes, or what he calls interruptions, intrusions of history. Because in the telling of the story, he's also going to take little side trips so you learn something about the person who's telling you the story. In the way that they're telling it. And so first you have to figure out what the narrative is, and then you figure out how you work in all of these other alliterations and these brilliant things about these particular people. And it's also somewhat familiar to me because I grew up, my early years were in the South. And a lot of this is a lot of the vernacular in August Wilson's plays are people who began life in the South, or Southerners who then moved north. And so the vernacular is very familiar to me, because you can still hear it. You know, these are things I heard my uncles or their friends. And, you know, when I would go as a small kid, you know, to the barbershop with my grandfather. I mean, just going to a black barbershop, you'll hear all these men and all these incredible characters. Still, to this day, you go into any black barbershop, you're going to run into characters. And language is so integral to black people's identity. Being great storytellers is integral to who we are. It's a great part of history. It's, you know, it's the oral history and the oral at the same time. You listen to great black ministers, you hear those things going on at the same time. So you have that in the back of your mind, but just technically looking on the page as you would with Shakespeare, as you try to stay on the language, you try to figure out what it is that you're trying to convey, what you're saying.
You know, you just mentioned a little bit about growing up in the South. I'm always interested in people's origin stories. Like, how did you come to this craft? Like, why? Like, how did you get here?
Well, church and theater have a lot in common, don't they? So going to church on Sundays, there's a certain theatricality to it. You may not necessarily be consciously aware of it. At some point as you get older, and certainly that happened to me, you become aware of the theatricality, and you know your lead actor is the minister. You know, and he has a certain time when he begins his great monologue, when he takes over. And then you have the choir as supporting, and you know when they know when to begin to sing, and they know what song to sing. So there is an orchestration, there is something very theatrical. I mean, and, you know, not to mention you get dressed up in your Sunday best, and you know, and the officials in the church wear their official costumes or wardrobes, the ushers and everybody. So there is this sense of theatricality to it that I wasn't necessarily aware of until, you know, you get to school and you encounter Shakespeare, or in my case, 7th grade, you know, just looking at a movie, the teacher showed a movie of A Man for All Seasons, and I just became awestruck by Paul Scofield at that moment. I mean, that's kind of when it happened to me, because he was playing this religious man. And what was so brilliant about him in these great costumes, because it was period, is his simplicity. And so I think because of the way I grew up, I began to see some little parallel, because of the whole church experience, you begin to see some parallels there. So I was bitten then, but still didn't think of it as a career path. And it wasn't until much, much later in high school when I did a Shakespeare festival. We had an English teacher who believed him. He was a great devotee of Shakespeare. I thought he would often, we thought humorously, thought he was a reincarnation of Shakespeare. I think he actually believed he was. And I performed he cast me as the porter from Macbeth in one of the Shakespeare festivals one year. And a drama teacher in the town, Miss Katie Dameron, saw me and asked me to come to her studio. And she's the one who put the bug in my head, because she had a son who had gone to Juilliard and was this great, I guess, mimist or mime artist, who then went on to study in France at the Marcel Marceau School. And she had another young man she had taught who also had gone to Juilliard. So she the seed of it was planted, but it was only through her that it made sense that there is a path to doing it.
So we almost lost you to being a mime. Is that what you're saying? I mean, I have done my research on you. You know, I know that August Wilson has played a big part in your life. And I would love for you to tell the story of your experience when you, I know your mother didn't really want this for you. She had another idea of what you want, but you saw Production Offenses with James Earl Jones.
I did.
And tell us that story, because I think it's interesting and
Well, I was in lovely Fort Sill, Oklahoma. I was doing, been in the military, so I was doing my officer basic course at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and it was just this particular Sunday, I believe it was. Yeah, it was Sunday. And I was just sitting there watching television, you know, because I still had that itch. And so I never really left it. So I decided to watch the Tony Awards. And I remember that day that night watching that and James Earl Jones and Courtney Vance together. And it just blew my mind. I'm going, I know this language. I know these people. And I think it's the first time I began to think that there's a place for me. Because growing up, I didn't see anybody who looked like me necessarily on television or who sounded like me. I mean, I grew up Sidney Poitier, but I didn't sound like Sidney Poitier.
Mm.
I didn't look like Sidney Poitier. But when I saw that, and it moved me so deeply, and I remember, you know, I was transfixed, and I went, oh my goodness, where did Courtney Vance go to school? Mm. That's when it happened. I said, where did he learn how to do this? How do I get to that? And that's when it began. I mean, I still, every now and then, I will still go on YouTube and watch that little snippet again and again and again, because it's just so magnificent. I mean, just little things that you hear as a kid, you know, when James Earl Jones goes, you sleep on my bedclothes. And I'm going, oh my God, he says bedclothes. That's the Southern thing. My grandmother called them bedclothes. Everybody else calls them sheets. In the South, you sleep on my bedclothes. So it was something so familiar and hit me in such an authentic, honest place that I could do this. But no, mom wasn't happy. She was looking for that doctor that I said I was going to be. So
yeah,
she was not pleased. Yeah, I applied to Yale and I did it secretly. I didn't tell her. I didn't say anything about it until I got the acceptance letter. And she was not happy.
How long did it take for Mama to come around?
Let's see. I think she came around probably around Grey Gardens.
Oh, wow.
That's a good, 20 years later?
Ooh, yes. I think she didn't come around until she came and she saw me and she saw, I mean, she'd seen Lennon and she'd seen some other things, but I think it was Grey Gardens. For some reason, it was Grey Gardens that she began to go, okay. He can do it. And Once Around the City, believe it or not, I think really a very short-lived musical that we did at second stage called Once Around the City. And she really loved that. She could not stop laughing and said, why didn't you tell me about this earlier? I would have come more often.
I think our mothers have limited memories of things like that.
They have their own logic. I don't argue with it.
You know, before we leave, I'm sorry, John Andrew. Before we leave, I would love for you to touch on just the experience working with Chadwick's last performance. How brilliant he is in Ma Rainey, and your experience with him.
Again, like I said, it became family. I mean, he was like my cousin. He truly was like being cousins because we became so comfortable with one another. In doing it heartedly, that's family. We would just take the piss out of each other in between takes. You know, no one was safe. And Chad wasn't even safe. I always tell the story. He has a line in the movie when he wants us to rehearse Levy's version of Ma's song. And so we pretend, the rest of us, Toledo and Cutler, pretend we're going to play it his way. And so I do this thing of saying, hold on, one of the strings here is loose, I need to fix it. And Levy has this line to Slow Drag: if you was any kind of musician, you'd take better care of your instrument. And so the way Chad would always do it, he would just cut me so deep with that line, and he was just so derisive about it. And then I remember later on when we were shooting, a few days later, and he picked up his cornet and the mouthpiece fell and hit the floor and made quite a racket. And everybody got quiet. And then very quietly, all you could hear was, if you was any kind of musician, you take that care. And he knew it had come back to bite him in the ass. And he kind of froze, closed his eyes, this big grin came over his face. He doubled over and collapsed on himself. He knew he got it. And that became the running joke on set. No matter any mistake, from the smallest to the largest, you knew you were going to hear that line. And we were just family, making fun of one another as the characters, and just as Michael and Chad and Coleman and Glenn. I mean, we got Glenn. We got Glenn cutting up.
I want to acknowledge, unfortunately, we're having a little bit of some internet issues that's kind of slowing things down. And Michael, I just want to ask you if you started your voice memo, if you can.
Yes,
just in case. Okay, wonderful, great. And apologies to anyone if we're working on it, and the issues are hopefully working themselves out. And also want to remind our audience to ask our esteemed guest questions. So please make sure that you put your question, you type it in, and one of us will ask Michael the question. Go ahead, John Andrew. I know you're up. Go ahead, my friend.
Oh, okay. And now I've forgotten the question. No, I didn't. Yale, talk to me about. You saw Courtney Vance, and you're like, okay, was it everything that you dreamed? What was that experience of being at such an incredible program?
It was strange because in my mind, I had no concept of what it would be at all. I mean, you think, you hear about it, you know the reputation of it, and you get there. And I remember our first year class, we were in the basement of one of the buildings. It's like paint peeling off the walls. And I'm going, this is Yale? Drama, we're in a basement. You know, and Earl would sometimes go around picking stuff up off the floor, throwing it, and he would get pissed about it. You know, because they weren't the greatest facilities. I mean, if you've been into Juilliard, you go and you see those rooms that are incredible.
Yeah.
You go to Yale School of Drama, you would never imagine that these were some of the spaces that all of these great actors had trained in and come out of. But because I didn't know what to expect, I went in there deciding that I didn't know anything. And so I was open to anything they wanted to teach me. And so I just ate it all up. And it was 3 golden years for me. I learned so much. I learned how to act. I learned what acting was. You could quantify it, that there was technique. There was a way of looking at what you did and being able to repeat it, and knowing how to analyze a script, how to, as an actor, tell a drama, although you know the end of it, but still not letting the audience know that you know how it ends, but playing each moment to moment to moment. So I learned so very, very much. I learned how to be an actor there. So in that sense, yes, it was everything I imagined. It lived up to everything I saw in that scene between James Earl Jones and Courtney Vance.
Amazing. Okay, so I'm following up again because I love Earl Gister. Please tell me about being in his class. One of the greatest master teachers ever, and
So Earl Gister was
Yes,
the chair of and
I
the
call
master acting teacher at Yale.
Yeah, he was when I was the associate dean and the head of the acting program. And, I always call him the invisible hand because his genius was that he knew where every actor was in their development. And he knew exactly what to say to you in your development. And he knew exactly how to help you find what the objective of a scene was. And he demanded that you be specific. I mean, he always kept pads while you were doing a scene, and he would write. And so you would have after you did the scene, he would talk to you about the scene, and he would ask you how you felt, and you would say, well, in this line or this part of this beat, I wasn't sure where I was, blah, blah, blah. And then he'd pick up the pad and he'd show you. And he knew, and every note that he had taken were exactly the moments where you felt you had lost the narrative, where you had lost the plot. He could see it, and he knew, and he could do simple things. Like his direction would be afterwards, he'd go, so what's in that corner of the room? He said, no, tell me what you placed in this room, in this scene. And you go, huh? And he'd go, what's over there in that corner? Over there. And you said, well, there's a mirror there. And then he'd go, oh, do the scene. And then you'd be like, just like that. Just masterful. No, he's I chalk it up. What you see me doing, Earl taught me. Earl taught me how to be that kind of actor. Consistently instilled a sense of no.
Mike, I want to talk to you a little bit. I've seen I've did a deep dive into your career and some interviews you've done. And you talk sometimes about demanding your worth as an actor. And if I can read a quote that you said, which I found fascinating, because then it goes back to Ma Rainey's, if you don't mind.
Please.
Okay, it's about demanding your worth, knowing that you're often valued less than a white artist. You have to say, no, this is what I want. This is what I need. This is what I'm worth. And I won't take any less than that. This is what Ma lives out in the movie. I'm not going to take a penny less. And no, getting me a Coca-Cola is not going to kill you. That's something that I deal with. I would love for you to talk a little bit about the worth and being a Black actor and knowing your worth.
Well, it was something to a certain extent that I started doing from the very beginning. When you first get out of school, you want to work, and you have agents who want you to work because that's how they make their living as well. But you have to figure out how you want to be seen, and you want to be respected for that. Because I remember an unusual thing happened in my class after we got out. Three of us went to the same agency, which was unusual. And two of my classmates are white male actors. And it always killed me that we would go and audition for the same shows, but they would go in for leads or second leads, and I would go in for smaller parts and smaller roles in the same thing. And I always tried to figure out, that didn't make any sense to me. Why is that? Why were they getting to go in for the leads? Now, there are certain things that make sense. They're taller, and they would fit more readily in what you would consider leading man category. But you set that aside after a while, and you begin to, when you go into these auditions, and I would get the sense a lot that I was being asked to constantly prove that I was as good as what you just saw. And sometimes I would be asked to do the same thing over and over again, as if they were waiting for me to trip up, that somehow I couldn't repeat it, or that what they saw me do the first time was sort of a fluke.
Wow.
And so the thing I always felt that my classmates, brilliant actors, that's to take nothing away from them, it seemed that they could be seen for Broadway seriously, that them getting to Broadway was taken more seriously. They were taken more seriously as actors from the same program than myself, that I somehow didn't quite get it. And I think it goes to this whole notion of, you know, the stereotype of our intellectual ability and things like that, that we couldn't possibly, after going through the same program and the same teacher, be as good as these white actors. And yeah, it's something that I think continues to happen, that I feel happens less so now, as I've gotten older in the business, and as I've developed a resume. But early on, I felt I was constantly being asked, and oftentimes, you know, me and another fellow black actor of mine, a friend of mine in class, early on we would laugh and compare by the end of the day how many times you were asked to make the story, to make our character more street, which they're not allowed to ask anymore. Right. But we would laugh at how many times this is Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. Mm-hmm. What do you mean more street?
Wow.
And that became the thing. It didn't matter what I was auditioning for. There was this perception that that was the only authentic Black experience. Mm-hmm. You had to come from the hood. You had to come from the street. And honestly, yeah, a lot of that was affected by Hollywood, because at that time, Boys in the Hood was a big movie. Mm-hmm. And so suddenly everyone had discovered again the urban Black male. But to constantly be asked that, and to constantly, what I thought sometimes being condescended to by white directors, is that they really needed to explain to me what this meant. And then in my head, I'm going, 10 lines. This is 10 lines.
Right. Was there a moment where you just can you know of a moment in an audition or a career when you were like, you know what? No.
Yes.
No.
Yes. I know of a moment. I won't name names.
Okay, no, please don't. But I would love to hear the story.
It was happening a lot during rehearsal of this piece. One of the lead actors in it, well regarded, deservedly so, because he was brilliant. But the director only seemed, it was a white actor, the director seemed to only be taking his questions or his concerns seriously. And the thing is, it was a play where I was the lead. It was by an African-American playwright. It was essentially an African-American story. But the white actor and the director was white. And he would sometimes cater to this white actor way too much. Sometimes when the playwright wasn't there, he would change lines for him. And I remember one specific day in rehearsal where I was asking a simple question. I just asked, do you want me to exit left or right? Stage left or stage right? And I got ignored. And so I asked again, stage left or stage right, because he was talking to the other white actor. And then he turns to me and he starts giving me this long explanation. And I felt it really kind of quite condescending. Just a simple question. Do I exit left or right? And I let him finish, and I just remembered losing it. I said, all I asked was a simple effing question. I just got angrier and angrier and angrier. Stage left. That's all you have to do. There are other people in this play besides, insert name of actor. And I'm sick and tired of you disrespecting me and disrespecting us. And I just started screaming. I remember I did such the cliche thing. I just stormed off stage and refused to continue rehearsal because I was so pissed, because I thought it was so disrespectful and obviously racist. If everyone else in the cast is Black and you're dismissive of us. Now, yeah, we're younger. We don't have the resume or the length of career as the older white actor, but it was just incredibly disrespectful. And I said, enough. I just no, I'm not going to do it anymore. And so he came down, he apologized. The lead actor, to give him credit, he says, "You're right. It's true.
Wow.
What we've been doing is wrong. And you're very, very right." So it changed then, but I had to have that moment.
Are you feeling a sense? I mean, you said a few minutes ago that you feel that the tide is turning a little bit, but do you really feel it?
I think it's turned a little bit as well. It's turned a bit as Black stories have become more profitable. That's what it boils down to. When it becomes, going back to Chad, you watch things changed in Hollywood because a movie about a Black superhero made billions of dollars, so it became profitable. So the attitudes began to shift in that sense. I think I deal with it becomes hard in this business because it's such a subjective business. But I do feel, to a certain extent, there's some people who still look at me and I wonder. I'm going, why do I bother to have a resume? Do you read it? Do you read the resume? Have you looked at the reel? Why do you need me to prove this to you? And then somebody else, I guess a story that goes to that is did a very successful TV show, True Detective. I'll say that. And that first season, which is still considered the best one. And I remember myself and my fellow actor Tori as the Black characters we weren't written for. Matthew and Woody. Now, of course, they're movie stars. We get it. They're the ones who are going to sell this. But at sometimes I just felt, they said, well, we're just idiots. We're the worst detectives in the world compared to them. And I'm going, you just left us. And afterwards, I remember the creator and showrunner coming up to me and saying, we didn't use you properly. And in my mind, I'm going, it's a little late for that, but we didn't use you properly. And I said to him, well, I'm not dead, and nor are you. Write me something.
Hey.
I'm not dead. You're not dead. Write me something. I'm still waiting. But it was
okay.
But it was that thing of watching that, of why weren't we given more to do? Why weren't our characters fleshed out as much? We know we're not the heroes of the movie, of the show. We're not supposed to be. But I didn't think we were treated as equitably. And I think that continues to happen. It's a little better because there are more Black stories being told.
Yeah, and more Black writers, I think.
Yeah, and from a wider palette. Let's just say that. There's a lot more variety in the stories being told. It's not that one story. So in that sense, it's better. It is getting better.
We have a question from the audience, from Dale Soules. Am I saying that right?
Souls.
Okay. Thank you. Dale Souls. My apologies. Dale Souls comments, you are a golden actor, my friend. I learned some things about your history I didn't know. Though Earl was brilliant, he had to have the raw material of your deep humanity to work with. Thank you, Dale Souls.
Thank you, Dale.
While we're on it, Raphael Clements asks, who were some of your classmates and schoolmates he acted with at the Yale School of Drama?
Oh, he wants me to name names.
Yes, please.
Liam Schreiber.
Oh, wow.
Come Getz, Chris Bauer, Camila Zanes, Amy Povich, Sarah Long, Daryl Fierce.
He had quite a class.
Mike June. Was that all? And Bernie Charity. Was that all of us? Did I get everybody? I think Marty New. I think I got all of us. And Raphael Clements, who was actually He was my, I guess, my mentor my first year there. He was a third year. And so he took care of me in the first year that I was at Yale.
Well, thank you, Raphael.
Yeah.
Thank you for being a mentor to this incredible actor. Go, John, please.
I have a question about, how do you take care of your spirit and your joy in this business when you're facing things like you've just mentioned? How do you manage self-care in terms of that, and so you can keep going in this business?
I'm fortunate enough to have great friends, just wonderful, generous of soul and spirit people. And so they feed me, as well as my family. As you can see, I like to laugh. My family likes to laugh.
Yeah.
Family name is Isaac, which I'm told in Hebrew means laughter. So, and we do that quite a lot with one another. We'll call each other and somehow we always end up laughing on the phone. And friends and music. I listen to a lot of music. Gregory Porter feeds me like nobody's business when I listen to him, or Kurt Elling, Morgan James. So that people who I listen to, that kind of put me in the right zone. And a lot of time it's just spent sitting and being quiet. That's incredibly important to me. My solitude, my quiet time is incredibly important because it's sort of where I rebalance. I get back into balance from everything that I have to deal with outside.
It's you've gone back and forth a lot you've worked a lot off Broadway. You trained, maybe I heard you say in an interview that you thought maybe you were going to do the classics forever. You worked at the Delacorte, at the Public, Second Stage, Mother Courage and Her Children, The Tempest, Richard III, and you found yourself in some pretty big musicals.
Yeah.
Basically stealing the show in the Book of Mormon, singing that song. I can say it on here, but singing kind of an anthem of what people are feeling these days.
Sure.
Can you talk a little bit about maybe the first time you heard that song and maybe the first time you performed it and what the heck happened? I know what happened, but I'd love for our audience to know.
The first time I heard that song, I went in for an initial audition. It's a longer story, but I'll make it shorter. It was
so let's mention the song. It's
Hasadiga Ibawai,
which translates to.
You really want me to say it?
Yeah, you can say it. It's okay.
Translated to "fuck you, God"
in Swahili.
Well, let's say in Matt Trey and Bobby's.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Not really. Swahili.
Okay.
But
Lopez, right.
I remember being asked to go in for it, and I thought, oh, come on. When you hear the provenance about it, it's like, I'm not gonna be in this. And my agent kept pushing me because he had wanted me to go in a few days earlier for Scottsboro Boys. And I had said, no, I'm not going to go in for the Scottsboro Boys. It's not. No one is going to like that. It's not going to run, Do you even know the story of the Scottsboro Boys? White people from Middle America are not going to come to Broadway to be told how terrible they were to Black people. And you're going to do it at a minstrel show? Do you know it? I was like, no. So then 2 days later, he called and he said, they want to see you for this Book of Mormon thing. And so I remember doing this. I was going, yes. I said it just to keep peace. And then I thought to myself, every musical theater actor and his brother is going to want to get into this show. I don't stand a chance of getting into it. Sure. And I had the best time. I went in and I sang the first time. because everybody was out in the waiting area, and I went in and I sang my Randy Newman song, and I was like, this is it. I've done it. My agent is, my manager's going to be happy. I'll never hear any more. Then I got a call, and they said, well, we would like you to come back, and we would like you to learn this song. And I think they gave it to me that day, even before I left. And so I went outside, I looked at it, and they gave me one of the scenes. And I was reading the music, and I think I scared some people outside because I just guffawed so loudly. I went, ah! And someone went, is it that funny? And I couldn't laugh. I said, they are not going to say this. You can't do this. This is impossible. But they were serious. And I came back the 2 days later to sing it. And that was, they were very sweet. They're very apologetic. We know it's not for everyone if you don't, blah, 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 blah. But I still didn't think I stood a chance of getting it, because the other actor who had been called back as well, I knew him from an encore show, and I knew he knows what he's doing, and he sounded great. And I never thought I'd get it. In fact, I went in and I told him, I said, this is too high. Because I go, that'll cinch you. It's too high. They'll get upset with you. You'll never get it.
You said that on purpose?
I did. It's too high. And they went, we'll drop it. We'll drop it. And right there, Stephen Aremus, right then and there, transposed it down.
Wow.
That's what happened. That's how I ended up in Book of Mormon, singing that song.
So talk about that, the first night you performed it, before those.
Oh my goodness, that first night when we sang that, we held for almost 2 minutes.
What?
We held for 2 minutes after we sing it, and then we get to the part where Mafala tells them what it actually means. Well, Igbo means God, and Hasadigo means fuck you. So I guess in English it would be fuck you, God. And the theater erupted. And there's a vamp. And the other African, my castmates are up there doing the dance and waiting so we could come back in to finish the song. And I'm stuck like this to heaven, waiting. And and my cue is I'm listening for the conductor, because I can't continue until I hear the music. It must have been a full 2 minutes. People did not stop applauding and screaming. And I've started to get nervous because I'm going, I can't finish the song. I can't hear the music. And I kind of peeked down at the conductor, at Stephen Aremus, and he was just like, he couldn't believe it. And everybody else in the cast up there I could hear them laughing because they couldn't believe we couldn't continue. It was insane. I'd never had that experience before, ever. But we must have held a good 2 minutes before we could finish the song.
And that's a long time on stage.
It's an eternity.
2 minutes is nothing. It's a blip. But holding on stage for the applause and laughter happens so rarely.
It was insane. It was never expected it. Never did.
The phenomenon of the Book of Mormon will live with you for the rest of your life. You stayed with the show a long time.
I did. I stayed 3 years. 3 years. Well, I was having a good time.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
I was having a good time. And with these great people, these insane, funny people, and this insane, great story. It's a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Come on, John.
Well, but I'm just curious, because you have all of these classics in your background and all of that stuff. What's the difference for you doing a musical or is it all the same bucket? It's
It's the same technique. Thank you, Earl Gulliver. It's this. You approach it with the same technique, but of course things are technically different. It's technically different doing a musical. It has its own demands. It's technically different doing a TV show or a movie than necessarily doing the classics. But I think each feeds in a different way. There's something incredibly immediate and exciting about theater. There's a sense of urgency. It's live. It's walking that high. It's a high wire act, really, and even more so when you add singing to it.
Yeah.
The stakes go even higher. And I think that's kind of exciting to do that. There is no other feeling like that. But then there's something else in telling stories in a very technical way, in a more intimate way when you get into television and movies. But I approach it with the exact same technique that I learned from Earl and all the other teachers at the school there. I'm shocked that I get to do. If you had asked me that this is what I would be doing at this point, I would have told you. In fact, I remember telling my classmates that I would never be doing all of this.
And your work on film and TV is soaring. I mean, your portrayal in The Wire, that character was so beautifully written, and a man of little words. But everything through the eyes was incredible. True detective. I mean, I know you talked about it, and maybe it wasn't written the way it should have, but I thought you were incredible in that. And what are you working on now? Are you allowed to tell us why you're in Chicago and what you're doing?
I'm working on a movie called Rounding, directed by Alex Thompson, who's just recently nominated for a Cassavetes Award. So he's an up and coming director here, and I play the head resident at this hospital in the North Midwest, who's trying to help this other young resident doctor get over the trauma of an earlier experience and help him become a doctor, become sort of his mentor. And we stumble upon a very interesting case as well, medical case, while we're doing that. So there's human story, and then there's the sort of mystery inside this very, very human story. Lovely script, great people, great cast.
You get a lot of doctors and police people, and you're so wonderful at it.
We love cop shows, we love doctor shows.
Yeah, we do. We love to watch it. I have a question. From Eva Heinemann. Asks, you are so versatile. How do you go from annoyingly and jitney to lovable and funny in The Prom? Did you ever have trouble convincing anyone you could do comedy after doing tragedy, and vice versa? Good question, Eva. Thank you.
Oh, that is a very, very good question. Well, although the first part, it's not difficult for me to go back because all these people are different, and I love transformation. I mean, I think people talk about different schools of, what type of actor you are. So I guess I would fall into the transformative actor. I love that. I've always loved that as a kid. I think that's the brilliance, and that's the genius of it, that I can convince you I'm somebody else, that I can. And that's the talent for me, to being able to step into someone else's reality, not just step into the playwright's reality, but step into the reality of the character that I'm playing. And, so, I guess it's an exercise. I'm very good at self-delusion. I can delude myself that I'm somebody else and completely embrace that. And it's the use of craft. It is the same thing as craft. Requires craft, but it also requires imagination. And I'm glad as a kid, my parents never throttled my imagination, never thwarted it. There was never any, you can't do that, you can't do this, until I decided I wanted to be an actor, of course. But prior to that, as I reminded her, it was her fault. Because as a kid, anything I said I could do, she would support. I mean, I remember I used to write letters to anybody and everybody. My mother would mail these letters. I drew up my own blueprints for my spaceship. And with magic marker and everything, how I wanted my spaceship built. My mother mailed it off to NASA for me.
Wow.
That sort of thing. And they respond. And so when your
They
imagination,
did respond.
they responded. They did. They
responded.
sent me a model of the Apollo something, or maybe the space shuttle at that point. But they sent me a model back.
Wow.
And I think that's a part of how I'm able to step into these different characters, because I don't believe I can't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, nothing in me. I don't have the common sense to go, no, you can't play that. I'm going, no, I can play that. I can figure that out. So it's not such a big deal for me to do it. Now, to the second part of the question, yeah, it's always casting directors see you in a particular way. I've been fortunate, and I think I've worked because different casting directors see me differently. There are casting directors who see me as a musical theater actor. There were casting directors who saw me as just an actor who did classics, or these different types of things. And there were casting directors and directors who saw me that I could do comedy as well. So that's what's kept me working. And oftentimes they didn't necessarily go back and forth. They didn't translate across casting directors. So it's that thing of being prepared for the opportunity when it comes. I knew I could. It's just when the opportunity came, I was ready. Let's just say
You're prepared.
I was prepared for it.
We do have a couple of minutes left, and
Okay.
I started asking you a question. You were in the prom with Beth Level, and you got to be on stage when she sings that 11 o'clock number, The Lady's Improving. And I'm going to fangirl a little bit about the two of you in that show and how incredible the electricity that ran through the theater when that character sings that song. What was the experience working on the prom and working with Beth and that incredible cast and the joy that you brought to audiences night after night after night?
Oh, I mean, that's it. I mean, to Beth Level, plain and simple, I love me some Beth Level. I mean, there was no artifice when she sang Ladies Improvement and I hopped off that desk. That was Michael and Tom Hawkins all at once being enthralled and enraptured by this creature who could do that. She's stunning. She's stunning. She's gorgeous. She's so generous. And she made it easy. I mean, she made, there'd be no Tom Hawkins without Beth Level's Dee Dee Small. She was just incredible. And that cast, insanely talented, funny people. Brooks and Chris and Angie and Caitlin and Isabel. I mean, we were crazy backstage. People, if you had any idea the hijinks we got up to before we were on stage, it was such a fun experience and such a privilege to do that, and even more so that it meant so much to people. I mean, it was a show that we weren't making any money. Thank you, Dory and Bill, for keeping it going, and all of our other investors, because it wasn't making any money.
No.
But it was making people happy. It meant so much to people. And you can't buy that. And that's what ultimately you hope you're doing as an artist, that you hope you're doing as an actor, that you're bringing that kind of joy from people, that you're invoking that. And I think we were able to do it. And I think it's the quality of the hearts and the generosity of the people involved in doing it and those who created it.
And you could feel the love you had for each other
Yes.
on
Absolutely.
stage.
Absolutely.
You brought it to us. Michael, you've done so much in your career. What is it that you haven't done that you'd love to tackle or try?
You mean as a role?
Anything. Yes, as a role or a certain play that you love to do.
I always threaten that I want to do Sweeney Todd.
Ooh.
That's not a threat.
I think that's a masterpiece. I think, it's just, I always come back to Sweeney Todd.
Oh.
What a role. What a challenge. And I think because the idea of it is so terrifying to me, but
and it's epic and Shakespearean in a way,
that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't it? It is, it's almost like a Lear in a sense. It's a great tragic character. Yeah. It's a beautiful piece. Just in the music. Oh my Lord.
Yeah, the music is fantastic.
Well, unfortunately on that, if anyone's listening, Michael Potts wants to play Sweeney Todd. So anybody out there, please give it to him. He said it right here.
Yeah, you should do it. Cast him.
Michael, I really want to thank you.
Be careful what I asked for.
Yes. But I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing this. I'm a very, very big fan, and I'm going to keep stalking you on Facebook. And it was a real pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I'm going to stalk you on Facebook too. Extra followers.
Just so you understand, I don't post that often. I'm not.
And that's our show. I'd like to thank our wonderful guest, Michael Potts, and thank you, John Andrew, for sharing hosting duties tonight, my friend. Next Monday, we are so honored to speak with Lynn Nottage. Joy D. Michelle and I have been preparing for weeks for that one. And the following Monday, John Andrew and I will be speaking to Moulin Rouge's Robin Herder. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed our show, please like the video, subscribe, and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. We will see you next week. Thank you all for coming. Thank you again, Michael Potts. You are a genius. So thank you. Good night, everybody. Please stay safe. Wear your mask. And we'll see you next week. Have a great night. And thank you all so much.